Good morning, everybody, or it's morning for us, wherever you are. Here comes another great episode today of our True Business Stories podcast. And it's with great pleasure that we want to introduce you to Otway Pasta. Now, Otway Pasta is owned by Steve Robinson, and he has a great story to tell. And it really is, as a young kid coming off a dairy farm, was it, Steve?
That's right. Yeah.
Coming off a dairy farm. And then by chance he ended up being a house husband, for want of another word. And that led to all sorts of things to where he is today, running a very successful, well-known pasta company called Otway Pasta.
So welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And I think this is your second podcast because I was listening to a podcast of you this morning. So we've got some questions probably around that. But let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What was your early childhood?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small country town called Kalangadoo. So Kalangadoo is about 30 k's north of Mount Gambier. I grew up on a dairy farm there. My parents obviously were on the farm, and then I think in 1989 we bought our neighbouring farm, which was another 500 acres. I think we had 300 acres to start with. So, and I would have been about 10 or 12 at that stage. So, being on the farm, one of five kids, we all had a fair bit to do with farm life, and probably at that, at 10. 1989, I think I would have been 10 or 11. Yeah, that was, I had a fair bit of involvement in the farm. I loved the farm life, I guess. And so buying this extra property next door, I just, I guess, I got up before school, 5:30, and went and got the cows in for Mum. The neighbouring property, we were milking in 2 dairies at that stage, so I went and got the cows in for Dad, and then come back and get ready for school. I won't lie that, there was times when I was took a bit longer to get back home, so I could miss out on going to school that day. But I guess that time and growing up on the farm was, certainly, I guess, cemented a lot of good and not so good work ethic in me.
I'll just stop there for a minute, Steve.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Mark, when you reflect back on some of our other podcasts. We've got 3 people who are all running successful businesses now that all grew up on dairy farms. So there must, and I spent 4 years as a little tacker on a dairy farm. There must be something in the milk, in the DNA, I think, that turns people into entrepreneurs.
Well, I think I have thought about this a bit over the years, and I can remember one day I was standing in the factory, I was making pasta and looking outside, and it was, cold, wet and rainy, and I had, like I was saying earlier, just as a young kid, I had a fair bit to do with the farm. So being out on a motorbike, getting the cows in at, 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's pretty cold and wet, compared to standing in a nice warm factory making pasta, it's a bit of a contrast. And whilst, we can get into it a bit more detail later, but, having a pasta manufacturing business is no walk in the park, but the contrast from the work perspective is just chalk and cheese, pardon the pun, I guess, but I think that there is a certain perspective that dairy farming, and there's obviously other businesses as well that can give you this perspective as well, but certainly dairy farming is very labour intensive, and you've got to be there every morning and every night. So running a pasta business is, what would I say, it's a walk in the park compared to that. I don't know, it's different, it's a lot more easy, I guess.
So what led to the pasta company?
Yeah, so really basically, so like I said before, I was one of 5 kids. Mum would make a lot of food products at home. She never actually made pasta, but she'd make butter and bread and those different things. And as you mentioned earlier, I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home dad. So probably I was a little bit bored, perhaps that's the truth. So then I was making things at home, and I used to make bread. I still do make bread, and I still, one of those products that I made at home was pasta. So I was just making pasta at home for the kids. Basically, that's what I started doing. Got lots of feedback on the pasta, and so we can go into that a bit more detail later if you like. But basically, I just started making pasta at home, and then one thing led to another.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. It's interesting. The stay-at-home dad situation is interesting. Mark, we know somebody that was a stay-at-home dad, and now he's the mayor of Geelong. In fact, before he did that, he was in the police force, and he was a prosecutor in the police force. So there is obviously some other lesson to learn there, in that by doing that, staying home, looking after your daughter. I know you've got a daughter. That by experimentation, you developed the art and the knack of being a good pasta maker. How did you turn that into a commercial operation?
Yeah, so and I don't like to try and piece it together a bit, even myself is difficult, but so the dairy farm, growing up on the dairy farm, having a somewhat interest in food products, and then being at home with Catherine, like I said earlier, I was, probably a bit bored, but like those sort of, like the dairy farming, mum making a lot of stuff at home, me being at home with Catherine, potentially being a bit bored, but by having some level of interest in food, all those sort of things together, then, obviously pasta was one of those foods that I was making at home. But then, how do you turn that into a business? Well, what happened was that my grandmother actually bought me a little pasta extruder, like a Philips pasta extruder, just a real small home type one. So she bought me that, and then that actually broke, and I was just looking on at the time. I can remember exactly where I was sitting. I was looking online to buy a second little pasta extruder to use as parts, because that's what I do, being on the farm and whatever. It's growing up on the farm, you learn to improvise and work out ways to fix things. But so that's what I thought I'd do. But anyway, there was this small commercial pasta machine for sale in Western Australia, and I think it was on Gumtree. Anyway, I rang the lady and said, look, I'm interested. And she said, oh, yeah, my dad imported it from Italy 40 years ago, and he's died. And, so I sort of had already, after talking to her, I had some attachment to this machine. So I thought for $360, I'd buy it. So then I bought it, and then it cost me about, the same to get it back from Western Australia. And then it was a 3-phase machine, so I had to put a little single-phase motor in this machine, and one thing led to another. And, there we are. The machine probably cost me $1,000, but that was okay. So, yeah, we got this little pasta machine back, fixed up, put the new motor in it, got it back from Western Australia. And then I was just making pasta really just for our family. I'd just make big batches and freeze it. The machine makes about 12 kilos an hour. So, but then, I'd have friends around and we'd make some pasta, and it's just a bit of fun. And like, certainly I enjoyed the process of making pasta, and then obviously being able to, at the time too, we had our own chooks. So I was, using the eggs from our own chooks, and it was, I guess it was a nice thing to do. It certainly aligned with what I grew up with mum making food and at home, and then being a stay-at-home dad as well. So then what happened was, a friend of mine, she was friends with the guys at Forest Brewing Company, and then Chris introduced me to Sharon. Sharon introduced me to a chef. The chef said, yeah, we'll have 12 kilos, I think it was. And it's like, shit, 12 kilos. I wasn't even, at that point, I wasn't set up as a commercial operation. But then what happened, another friend of mine, she owned a cafe in Colac called The Farmer's Wife, which is now The Farmer's Son. She said, just bring your machine down here. That'll cover you under the food safety, from a food safety point of view. So we did that, and made the 20 kilos or 12 kilos, whatever it was, for Forest. And the feedback was really good. And then at the same time, The Farmer's Wife started, they put the product into their deli section. So just, the feedback was really good. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe this can work. And with Catherine, my daughter being, 18 months at the time, I guess she was easier to to manage, I guess, in some respects, that I had a bit more time up my sleeve. And so, the business was born. Not quite as simple as that, but we had to get all the regulations sorted, but we did that, and that wasn't too hard. But then we just sort of started to sell a little bit of product, down the coast, and I guess the feedback was really good, and it was just I guess the one lucky thing I had going for me at the time was that because Catherine was only 18 months old, I couldn't, and I was a stay-at-home dad, I couldn't go or do too much, and it sort of got to the point too where it was we actually had to knock business back because I needed to make sure that I was obviously meeting all of Catherine's needs, and but that I guess that again the most important thing to me now, even as I sit here 10 years on, that family and being available for my family is really important. But I guess bringing those same values back to when Catherine was 18 months, 2 years old, that was still the focus, and I just needed to make sure I was there. But as Catherine grew and she went, started going to kinder and then obviously to school, that allowed me more time. And pretty much, like you could say, like clockwork, the business grew in line with Catherine going to kinder, and then obviously Catherine starting school. So really, really lucky to have the opportunity to be at home, but also then had the opportunity for the business. That's my phone. Had the opportunity for the business to grow alongside her as well.
So one thing that struck me out of that was the networks that helped you. So just the connections. A lot of the time when Bill and I are chatting to people in a mentoring capacity, we talk about them building networks and having networks and making sure they don't undervalue those networks. And that obviously paid up for you with people saying, well, come and put your machine here, or...
Yeah, look, for sure, absolutely. And I think that again, family relationships and those things are, we'll all sit here and agree that they're, the most important thing to us. But is your behaviour aligning with that? And I have been conscious of that over the time. And, at the risk of sounding silly, I guess, I had the opportunity to go and make my pasta at the Farmer's Wife, or I had Chris introduce me to Sharon from Forest Brewing, because I feel like I'm a reasonably open person and people perceive me that way, not because I'm perceived that way necessarily. It's just part of who I am, and I know that sounds silly, but or I'm up myself, so to speak. It's not about that. It's just that like you get what you give a lot of the time, not always, but yeah.
Yeah, but just Steve, and Mark and I work the same way, and that's how we get our contacts for doing our podcast, of course. But what you do is you develop, without even trying, what I call a trusted network, and that's how it all goes. And one thing leads to another, and I can guarantee you, that you could have sat down at the beginning and said, right, I'm going to do a master plan for this, I'm going to do a business plan, and tried to formalise it all. But I can guarantee you wouldn't be where you are today if you hadn't have run with your gut, used your networks, and while I think of it, also Mark, have a look at Steve's website at otwaypasta.com.au, and I know there are a number of videos on that site. Steve, are they still there?
Yeah, still there. Yep.
So it's if you're listening to this, go and have a look at Steve's site as well, because he's got a number of videos he's produced on preparing pasta, and it's probably really a replication of what he was like in his family kitchen in those early days.
And it's sort of sliding door moments too. You could have just decided not to go down to the Forest Brewing that day because, for whatever reason, and it's those things. It's picking up and running with things, and then it opens opportunities rather than, you didn't question in your mind why you were going, you just went.
Yeah.
And here you are today.
That's right.
It's a good story.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, it is. And I guess leading on to what I was saying earlier is that when you, and I've been conscious of this, when you approach things from the point of view of what's in it for me or what can I gain from this interaction or relationship or whatever, I think it's harder than if you approach a relationship or like, how may I serve? And I think that's, whilst I'm not perfect at that, it is always in the back of my mind that, what can I offer to a situation or to a person? And I think Bill just saying there about the cooking videos. So I would say that the natural consequence. So the cooking videos, from my point of view, are about adding value. So we can explain to someone, a good process or a good way to cook something or a good recipe. The natural consequence of adding value is engagement. So if that's engagement with me or engagement with our business, that translates, not necessarily, but a lot of the time that'll translate into sales. And certainly not doing it for that reason, but it's the same as the natural consequence of saying, how may I serve, instead of what's in it for me. How may I serve? People want to give back to you, or whatever. And I think that's, where I've found, especially in the early days. And look, it happens every day. It does happen every day. I mean, I receive so much. It's, I wouldn't even be able to begin to explain those things. But if you're just approaching things from that angle, at the same time not being a doormat, but just, what can I offer here?
Well, there's two reasons that you're successful now, and of course your products are in a number of independent supermarkets and in a couple of one of the big boys, I think, as well at the same time. But you're the face of it, and people relate to your product because of you, the person, and your own values. And the other most important, or nearly most important, of course, is the quality of what you produce. And you might like to just quickly talk about the fact of how you monitor the quality of your ingredients and your philosophy about the ingredients you use.
Yeah, so basically we are using the same ratios, flour, eggs, in salt in our pasta that I was using when we first, when I was making it at home on the kitchen table. So that hasn't changed. And I remember one day sitting there before the business had started, that I was sitting there having pasta for lunch, and I was like, man, this is so nice. So nice, especially compared to, what you can buy, you could buy at the time. So then, and that must have been all at the same time the business was sort of starting to, get some legs, or I was starting to even think about it. So that's sort of what we've done, and we've really held true to that, we're going to use the best possible ingredients that we can find. And just, for an example, if you guys go onto our website, you can see some of the chooks that lay the eggs for the pasta. Just an example of that. So we're buying eggs at the moment for, just say, for example, we're buying them for 40 cents. We can certainly go and buy eggs that are free range by the standard for, I don't know, somewhere around 17 cents or what have you. So, you can imagine if we're using 10,000 eggs a week and we halve that cost, that's a massive, I think, is that $20,000 a week? Is that right?
A lot of money.
Yeah. You can imagine that's pretty attractive. That's a pretty attractive option. But we know that if we do that, our quality just changes significantly. So we're not. So it's, I guess there's always that bit of a push-pull between, we need to reduce our input costs, but, we've just always maintained, I wanted the product to taste like it did when I was sitting at my kitchen table 10 years ago. So if we want that, we've got to maintain the quality of the ingredients going in. So like I'm sure you've all heard, garbage in, garbage out, we're the opposite to that. It's not rocket science. What we're doing is not crazy or reinventing the wheel. It's just, if I want to make pasta like I did back then, I've got to continue to use the same ingredients that I did back then, and that's what we do.
That's really important. That quality aspect is vitally important. How many kilos are you making now from your initial 12? Where are you up to now?
I don't know.
In the tons?
Yes, certainly tons a week for sure. I don't know. I probably should know that, shouldn't I? But I don't.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of pasta.
Well, it is, and I think this is really, really, really important. When I think back to when I first started, so August 2013. August 2013, we had a turnover of $236 for the month. And it's really humbling to think, here we are, 9-10 years later, and the business has just it's grown to what it is today from that, really just one idea. And that's, whilst I've, been part of that, obviously, we wouldn't be able to do that if, we weren't getting the support from our customers. And, that's another really important thing to us as a business, to be not take that for granted and to be certainly grateful of that.
Well, the other thing there, of course, Mark, is that Steve is no longer on the kitchen table, but he's got a great facility, a proper food factory, as we should call it, or an excellent food factory based in Colac in the western region of Victoria. And it's very when you look through those windows in the production room and see the wheels turning and the pasta flying around, it's very impressive indeed. So the other thing that, from a business point of view and a business lesson that Steve portrays, is that he understands that it's not always about growth, and that there's a lot of other issues come into being a business owner. Well, first of all, keep your sanity. And there's another story, because he's also survived
Not
COVID. Yeah. But you've survived COVID, and you've got a professional production manager in place, and your challenge, as with a number of other businesses that have grown like you have, is how do you manage the business? We go back to our old Michael Gerber theory. How do you work on it and you're not sort of stuck in it? Well, one of the lessons, I think, of a sole operator, and particularly in the regions, is that you can never escape from the responsibility and the need to keep working in the business to know what's going on. But as I say, the lesson I've got from you is it's not about chasing growth. It's organic growth, and that there is a spot, as Mark well knows, my favourite saying, there is a sweet spot where you can live a life, you can sleep at night, you're not in debt, and you're making a great product and your customers are happy, and that's the most important part.
So, next 10 years, Steve, where do you see? Given that you're probably at that sweet spot, you've got a good life, you're enjoying your product, you've got good customers. As word grows, no doubt you're fielding calls. Can we take a supply of pasta from you?
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in next 10 years?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure, to be honest. They're certainly still enjoying the journey with Otway Pasta Company. I probably, if I'm being honest too, I've worked pretty hard the last 10 years, so it'd be nice to back off a little bit. I don't know. I think that this, interesting question. I don't know. I guess that I still enjoy the business. I still need to, obviously need to, I'm only 43, I think. So, still need to obviously do something, from a work perspective. So I think I'll keep plugging away at what we're doing now. And we obviously, we still have a bit of room to grow, and we'll continue to grow. And there's no doubt that I really enjoy the challenge of food manufacturing, and producing different products, and improving our efficiency as a business, and all those sort of things are really, they do get me out of bed every day. So hopefully I can continue to do that for a bit longer.
And I've got to ask you, what's your favourite pasta?
Yeah, spaghetti's my favourite for sure. Fresh spaghetti is good.
And was that the original?
No, so we only introduced. Spaghetti was not on the product line. I don't know. It must have been 3 or 4 years after we started. So, but spaghetti's our bestseller now. So
Must be doing something right then. It's
maybe, yeah.
fantastic. Cool.
In some of our other interviews, people that have survived COVID and have similar backgrounds to what you've had and built up a good business, they say to us that persistence is what got them through. So do you think that applies to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I'm not sitting here. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Don't have a huge skill bank or anything like that. But yeah, one thing, if there's one thing I am, it's persistent. And that's, it's a fine line with that too between, being a bit insane as well.
All right,
at the same time.
we'll wind up very shortly. But Steve, it's been great talking to you. And I guess my final question is, why Colac? And it's in the Western District, but I also know that Colac has got some other great small food companies down there and some large food companies. But why Colac?
Well, long story, but I guess if we're going to look at why Colac is great for business, I think that, we are able to we can produce a pack of pasta today, 3 or 4 o'clock today, and it can be on a shelf in queue by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So, there's no real disadvantage to being out in the country, but there's a lot of advantages. Obviously, I know it takes me 2 or 3 minutes to get to work. We have in Colac and in the area an awesome food manufacturing network, Illawarra Sourdough, just to name one. Obviously, we've got Buller and ALC there in Colac. So the food industries in the area are great, and the support and the teamwork, I guess, that we are able to have with those is great too.
And staffing requirements, you're finding you've got people, you can find people, because that's the big cry at the moment, that no one can find employees. So
yeah, look, we've been very lucky. Like Bill mentioned earlier, we've got a really good production manager in Brad Donovan on the team, and he's got a lot of contacts locally. So we haven't had any staffing issues as such.
Fantastic.
But that's, purely really because of Brad, I guess. But
and possibly the values that you hold, because word would be out. So if there's a job going, you probably get people wanting to come and work for you, which is good.
We do. And we're often getting phone calls and emails from people too.
Fantastic. So Steve, thank you very much. Make sure folks go and have a look at otwaypasta.com.au. Is the website. And you can order, I assume, through the website.
We don't sell direct, but you can see all our stockists on the website.
Yep. So look at the stockists on there and give it a go. And thank you very much, Steve, for chatting about your business, and good luck in the future.
Thanks very much.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast, brought to you by Barwon Southwest Mentors. If you'd like to know more about how we can help your business, look at smeadvisory.com.au for contact details.